All right, everybody. It's the Working Fans Combatcast coming at you at Friday. Chevy's away on personal leave this week, so we got AJ Strangebrew in the house. We're going to talk a little boxing. And before we do anything, it's that interview. It's that video segment you all love. Here it comes. Boom. Are you a fan of pro wrestling, comedy, and combat sports? Then we have the podcast for you because we cover that and much, much more.
Do you like to debate with your friends? Do we have the perfect segment for you? It's the 531, where we take any given subject, break it down to a top 5. From there, we debate it down to 3 and then into that number 1 spot.
If you want to get a hold of us, find us on our social medias. Search Working Fans Podcast on any major social media platform. And if you want to find the podcast, search for us on any major podcast platform, as well as YouTube.
Working Fans Podcast. We put in the work so you don't have to.
Bada bing, bada boom, the realest guys in the room. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I can't wait to talk about boxing's greatest matches, especially WrestleMania 2. And I believe it was Piper versus Mr. T. People are going to be hanging and banging.
Pity the fool. I like that we're going to talk about boxing this week. And right away, to set the tone, since Chevy's not here, you're here. We're going to get as authentic as we can by me talking about Cass and Enzo quoted, and you bringing up Piper and Mr. T. We're going to lay the groundwork of what we do here when me and AJ do this.
I would like to clarify right away also, these are going to be the matches that we enjoyed, not necessarily the greatest matches of all time, but they're going to be the greatest boxing matches and something that meant things to us as people growing up and now.
Right. AJ was a fan of boxing, and AJ's also more a fan of some historical boxing. Like, I would say you saw some boxing when you were a kid like I did, but you went out at some point in your life, you went down some rabbit holes and got interested in old-time boxing and maybe some of the political aspects of it even.
Yeah, I do like the political aspects of it because boxing is very much a political game. You can be the greatest boxer in the world, and if you don't have the right promoter in your corner, the right person pushing you, then you're going to be the greatest boxer working in a little freaking club in New York City for the rest of your life and not necessarily ever seen by the mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, not only that political, but I mean, if you go to historical boxing, I mean, God, was it Joe Louis who beat some of the famous German fighters that were like Hitler's?
Joe Louis, obviously, his big one was against Max Schmeling right before the beginning of World War II. And that set the tone for America versus Germany in World War II. You had this black heavyweight boxer going up against the Aryan fighter in Max Schmeling. Now, Max Schmeling, if you actually talk to him, never actually felt that way. He was not a person who necessarily agreed with what Hitler was doing. However, he became the face of boxing under Hitler, so therefore there's a lot of history to it. Not only that, but you can talk about Jack Johnson and being an African-American and fighting the way that he had to fight at the turn of the last century. The man was stripped of his title because he married a white woman and crossed state lines with her. So he ended up having to give his belt away and actually throw a fight to give the belt away, not just get stripped of it, but he had to go in the ring for and actually carry a white boxer and basically make the guy look good and give up the title that way.
He had to throw the fight.
Yeah, he had to actually literally throw the fight in order to give the belt away.
Right.
It wasn't like the political Muhammad Ali where they stripped him of the title because he didn't want to go to war and believed in peace. But it was more of an actual just straight racism. Hey, you got to go in there and make this other white fighter look fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting. My dad was he was a fan of Muhammad Ali, and as you know, my dad went to Vietnam, Korea. His thoughts always were that Muhammad Ali didn't just dodge a draft; he went through the political system and he fought it that way, and so he always respected that aspect of Muhammad Ali.
Now there is a whole generation of
Not everybody feels that way.
I was going to say, there's a whole generation of primarily white boxing fans that to the day that they died would call him Cassius Clay instead of Muhammad Ali because of whatever their racist views were and because of whatever their political stances were. They just refused to call the man Muhammad Ali. And it's just sickening to think that that was something that happened in that time period.
Now, before we get to our list too, I want to throw this out there. Sort of, what's up, producer Joe, in the comments here. Joe, you can hit us with some favorite fights if you want to, if you got time.
His favorite fight is the one in aisle 3 at Walmart.
I don't need to know about that. What I'm wondering too, though, before we get to some list here, Muhammad Ali with the Cassius Clay thing. Now, Ali being a big pro wrestling fan, Ali who was I think he even talked about maybe somewhere about how he borrowed stuff from Gorgeous George into getting people to hate him. Would you say that these racist white people too, who wanted to call him Cassius Clay, Ali would maybe lean into that a little bit, like antagonize him and, hey, get him to pay money to try to see him get beat up?
One of the reasons why his fights drew the way that they did was because he used that professional wrestling style of promo. And he grew up in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And in that Louisville, Kentucky area, you're talking about a lot of seeing a lot of that racism as a child. And he had watched on TV guys like Gorgeous George. And when he watched that, he saw how he could push the limits and push the buttons with his flamboyancy, which also came across to those same people who would hate him for being black. A lot of them disliked George because of his flamboyancy. And he leaned into that and used it to draw money.
Absolutely. A different era. Randy, we appreciate you noticing AJ's fashion sense for our wrestling fans there. Steve Macklin.
Macklin's got a very large fan base, so I like to really go to the really aim for that people.
Yeah, aim for the the casuals. Yeah. Now, I would say too, and just before one more thing before we get to these lists of ours, talking about the pro wrestling boxing connection a little bit too. I mean, this just continues to this day. Like Floyd Mayweather was involved in WrestleMania. He clearly gets it. Floyd Mayweather, one of the greatest fighters of all time, but he really started to gain attention when he basically took on the persona of Floyd Money Mayweather.
Same thing with the Gypsy King. I mean, both of them really understand what it takes to get people to tune in and to pay money to see them. People to this day still will go, oh, you can't consider Floyd Mayweather the best. He couldn't knock anyone out. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. He would go late in the rounds. He did what it took to draw money. He knew that if he knocked everybody out, and I'm not saying he could knock everybody out, but if he knew that if he knocked everybody out in the first round, you're only going to get so much of a buy rate. Whereas making the matches and making you believe the person's got a chance is how you draw money. And
I'll get into this too. Canelo Triple G. I'll just answer that real quick because I do want to touch on this. At the end of the day, Canelo fought well, but he fought an older version of Triple G. And I think we thought this was probably what was going to happen at this point.
Yeah, at this point, they're both, quite frankly, older than they were in the first fight, which was absolutely amazing. And it's not what it once was, unfortunately. To me, it's kind of like Pacquiao versus Mayweather. We're never going to see the fight that we actually wanted to see from them because we're never going to see Pacquiao and Mayweather in their primes versus each other. Even that shell of a fight that we eventually did see was nowhere near what it should have been.
Barbed Wire Massacre at Victory Road. Yes, indeed. We will talk a little bit about that. Randy, we're coming back with the wrestling podcast after this at 12. But one more thing, too.
I think people are confused because of seeing my face instead of Chevy.
Yeah, this is the Combatcast, Randy. We're just talking a little boxing today because AJ was a boxing fan, and we just want to talk about some of our favorite fights. And Chevy's out for that.
I think sometimes because I'm a historical boxing fan that people forget that I still watch boxing.
Yeah.
But I do still to this day enjoy boxing. I just don't talk about it quite as much as I talk about wrestling, unfortunately.
Well, and I just want to lean into what you're saying. One more thing too. What you talked about Mayweather not being the guy that knocks everybody out, but he still did what he had to do, and he drew money. Chael Sonnen in MMA, same thing. He didn't have the most exciting fighting style, but he talked a lot of trash. He drew people in.
But there's been a few boxers and fighters like that. Same thing when it comes to Roy Jones Jr. Everybody, when it comes to Roy Jones Jr., he didn't knock people out. The guy won championships at multiple weight levels, one of the most impressive fighters of all time. And the thing that people still say is, yeah, but he didn't knock anyone out.
Yeah, that's what it boils down to. And that goes back history. So many boxers who borrowed from pro wrestling, even like you said, Tyson Fury, who clearly gets it. But yeah, I think, we're talking a little bit about history of boxing as it relates to pro wrestling, some of the historical stuff. Would you like to go with your list first, or you want me to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off with my list. So my first fight is going to be the one that really made me love boxing in the first place. And it's 1981, September 16th. It's Sugar Ray Leonard versus Thomas Hearns,
Nice.
the Hitman. This match, to me, this fight itself is what boxing's all about. You got Sugar Ray, who was giving up the reach advantage and a little bit of the lankiness to Thomas Hearns. So Hearns had to try to keep him to the outside and keep him away a little bit. And then you had one of the best scientific and technical fighters of all time, Sugar Ray Leonard. And he came inside, and the match was just aggressive. They stuck to it. You had a couple rounds in the 6th and 7th round where Leonard really did just outbox him by getting in close. But at the end of it, the technical stoppage, they had to stop the fight because Hearns just at that point was just too much for Leonard. And it was just an incredible fight from bell to bell.
Before you get to that one, I just want to say that I did not pick that fight on my list, but I do want to say that's one of my earliest boxing memories as well. I remember Ray Leonard making the comeback, and that Ray Leonard I became a big fan of. And there's some other fights where Ray's going to make my list, and maybe he'll make your list too. I don't know. But like that fight too, for me, was also the earliest memory. Me and AJ are about the same age, of course, too. But just say it. Go ahead.
Yeah, another one of my favorite fights is actually a little bit more recent. It is 17 years ago, and so it's weird that I say a little bit more recent. But Diego Corrales versus Jose Luis Castillo. Sorry, this is a fight from May 7th, 2005. If you ever want to see just a great fight, these two literally beat the crap out of each other for 10 rounds. At the end of the fight in the final round, it looks like Castillo is got the fight won. He knocks down Corrales twice. Corrales staggers to his feet and actually hits him with a miraculous punch out of nowhere and just knocks out El Terrible. And it's just done from there, and they had to call the fight there. It's just, if you want to see one of those fights that just will make you love how spontaneous boxing can be, that's the fight to watch for you. I'm telling you, go and check that one out. Foreman versus Ron Lyle is another one of my favorite ones from January 24th of 1976. This is just such a showcase of what George Foreman could do in his prime. George Foreman, unfortunately, either gets remembered as the old man who came back selling grills, or he's remembered for losing to Muhammad Ali. But if you want to see why George Foreman was as dangerous as he was and why people thought that he could compete with Muhammad Ali, watch him versus Ron Lyle. You'll love the fight.
Yeah, and I'll say this too. With Ron Lyle, because I got to see this fight later in my life too, I was not aware how strong Ron Lyle was. And you're going to see how hard he hits. Ultimately, Foreman does win the fight, but they take turns knocking each other down.
They beat the crap out of each other. It looks like they're hitting each other with cinder blocks, for Christ's sake.
It is a spectacle.
Foreman versus Frazier, October 30th, 1974. It's the Rumble in the Jungle, baby. If you don't, if this is not in your top five, sorry. Yeah. That's sorry. I meant Ali Foreman. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, Rumble in the Jungle.
Yeah, it's the Rumble in the Jungle. It's absolutely incredible, and it's punching power. This is the one where Muhammad Ali tells you flat out, the reason why I won the fight is because Foreman hit me so hard early in the match, my body went numb, and I just actually didn't feel punches after that.
Right.
So he actually literally was able to rope-a-dope him because he didn't feel any of the pain afterwards.
Right, like his arms started to go numb. He was hitting his arms a lot of times.
Absolutely incredible. I think this is one of the fights that led to the nerve damage that eventually helped with his Parkinson's a little bit because he did that rope-a-dope style, and people forget how great Muhammad Ali was and how much damage he could just take.
Yeah, one of the great combat sports minds.
Exactly. Now, I got to tell you, this was a hard one for me because I almost wanted to put the Jake rule into effect because when it came down to my number 5 match, there were 2 matches that I was debating back and forth with, and I'm not going to pull the Jake rule, and actually put both of them on there. I'm actually leaving off Muhammad Ali and Frazier because it didn't actually mean as much to me as this fight did. Now, this is my number 1 fight in it's my number 5 spot, but my number 1 fight is Marvin Hagler versus Thomas Hearns. This is a different fight than Sugar Ray versus the Hitman. This one is just 2 guys once again beating the living hell out of each other and just going at it. And this was April 15th, 1985. It is absolutely incredible. It lasted for 3 rounds, but it's literally an 8-minute slugfest, just beating the living hell out of each other, standing toe-to-toe, and then Hagler ends up winning it in the 3rd round with a right hand, followed by 2 uppercuts. Just an exciting fight. If you haven't seen it, please check it out.
Great fight, awesome fight, one of the real classic brawls. Even if you're not a big boxing fan, you'll enjoy this. Just want to get to these comments before I read my list. First off, Randy breaking it. Yes, Fury is fighting Joshua. Very excited to see that. Although to me, Joshua has looked a little off a step. He's lost a couple fights recently. I don't think that fight means what it once did, but it will be big probably in Europe. And Josh DeBoard, I ain't gonna at you, brother. Floyd Mayweather Big Show was a spectacle. And if you go to Vegas, in one of the lounges, like they have like a wall for Floyd Mayweather for some of his stuff, and they actually have the outfit he wore against Big Show. So Floyd gets it.
Well, let's talk about the fact that he just busted the Big Show's nose, and the Big Show just keeps going like he didn't even.
Yeah,
Big Show was gonna murder him for busting his nose.
Yeah, that was some good stuff. Now I'll get to my list here. I also have Hagler and Hearns. That was number 2 on my list, but I'm just going to tell you that now. So I had it for basically the same reason AJ did. I thought it was just a classic brawl. It's also one of those fights that it transcends boxing. Like it's just that kind of a brawl that if you're not a big boxing fan, you don't like the science of boxing, but you just want to see guys that are like, you want to see violence, check out Hagler Hearns. Yeah, I think Big Show is alive somewhere now. I think he's elite or something like that. So keep an eye out for a Big Show, Paul White. Here's a fight that just means something. I watched this fight with my dad. This was also a brawl. I ran Barkley and Roberto Duran. Barkley was a guy, I believe he had one of those like WBO titles at the time, and he was good, but he just never reached that level of like a Duran or a Leonard or a Hearns. But here he was fighting Duran, who Duran had took time off already, was kind of past his prime a little bit, but Duran came back, and stylistically, these two just beat the crap out of each other. This was one of those fights, too, that actually wasn't on pay-per-view because they didn't, think it was going to be like that many people would watch it, and it ended up being like, I don't know if it was USA, ESPN or something, and it was just awesome. I still remember watching that with my dad late at night. Sugar Ray Leonard, Marvin Hagler, because I remember Hearns and Leonard going at it, and I remember kind of being it, but it was the Hagler-Leonard fight that super got me pumped up because it was all around. Every news media source was covering this at the time because Leonard had been away with an eye injury for a little while, and we weren't sure what kind of Sugar Ray came back, and people thought Hagler would handle him easily. That did not happen. Now, it is arguable that Hagler won the fight. If you watch it, I think Hagler did win the fight in retrospect. But Leonard put on such a performance, and he put on such a style of fight in certain rounds, you can see where judges thought, okay, Ray Leonard won this fight. It was masterfully done.
Well, I think the judges also went a little bit with their hearts in that one too. Don't get me wrong. Stylistically, I could see what I agree with you. I think Hagler won the fight also.
Yeah.
To me, in that fight, they definitely voted a little bit with their heart. And while the style of Leonard definitely showed up, to me, Hagler's a straight up winner in that fight.
Yeah. I think Leonard just knew how to be flashy in certain rounds, and I think that won some points possibly too. But whatever the case, though, one little side note of this. Out of all the guys, when I talked about before about Duran coming back to fight, Leonard coming back to fight, Marvin Hagler never fought again after this. He was so disgusted with boxing and this decision, he never returned.
And that sometimes can also be that political side of boxing.
Yeah. Now, 2 last fights. Holyfield Tyson, the initial one. I was a Holyfield guy. I thought it was always interesting. This guy was never really recognized at the time. He was like being a great heavyweight, and people thought he wasn't going to be. Go ahead.
Is that the one that we were at Jeff Way's house for?
I was getting to that too. I think we might have been for both of them. We were definitely there for this one. I don't think you were there for the second one. I might have been where Holyfield got his ear bit. But this initial fight where Holyfield just won, and I remember the gentleman AJ's talking about, his dad was super into Tyson. And we kind of played it cool because this guy was kind of volatile. We didn't feel like dealing with that. But I could tell AJ and I were both thinking at the same time, like, I'm going for Holyfield in this. I want Holyfield to win. And it was hard not to be excited. Like, we tried to tone it back, but like, it was super cool watching Holyfield put in that work and basically outclass Mike Tyson in that fight.
Well, one of the ones that almost made my list, just because it's one of my funnest ones to go back and watch, is actually the Buster Douglas versus Tyson, just because Tyson was such a monster in that time period.
Yeah.
And how many whiny Tyson fans there were right afterwards. It was just absolutely, it's one of my funnest ones to go back and watch.
Yeah, I mean, and look, Tyson was a monster. He's got a lot of fans. It's great, but at the time too, like, he did not take him seriously. And Buster Douglas fought the fight of his life. So, and the last fight on my list, a fight that basically kind of got me back into boxing in the last few years, the first ever Tyson Fury Dante Wilder fight. Wilder coming in, the big powerhouse. Everybody figured he'd knock him out. The initial fight was a draw. But this was the fight that Tyson Fury basically outboxed him for most of the fight, but got knocked down a couple times, including basically being out, but just rose up at the count of 8 like The Undertaker, and just started fighting like nothing had stopped him, and just says so much about Fury. Like, he instinctively went back into boxing mode once he gained consciousness.
Yeah, that's not easy to do. And that is a great fight. They're all fun fight. And one of the things that's fun about these lists is the fact that there's so many great fights that mean so much to us on different levels. It's hard to just pick certain fights for different reasons. And on any given day, there could be a different 5 fights that we choose because you're talking about something that's over 200 years of history.
Yeah.
That at any time you could actually pick, oh my God, well, you know what? I remember this John L. Sullivan. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's great stuff. They fought for 40 rounds. That's incredible.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of history in boxing, just like pro wrestling. Not as much for MMA. MMA is still relatively new. That's about 25 years, I believe, now, or close to it. But guys, this was the Combatcast. Chevy will be back next week. We are going to be previewing Duran versus Jan. And then the following week, we'll come up with something because there's no UFC right then, I believe. And we'll have some fun stuff coming in the future for you. We're always working on stuff. AJ, thank you for sitting in with me this week.
No, it was great. And I think that Duran versus Jan is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, it's not actually. It's a very exciting card, but that's all right. Guys, we'll be back in the future with me and Sheva Rudy. Sheva Rudy, if you catch this, shout out to your brother. Hope you're doing well. The team misses you. And we'll again, thanks for tuning in to the Combatcast. We'll see